Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you Come Follow Me for September, and I'm excited to get into this with you. So if you are interested in this type of content or other homeschool content, please remember to subscribe and let's talk about Come Follow Me. Okay, so we're getting into the part of the New Testament that is part of my favorite because I love reading about Paul, but it's also a little bit difficult because there's not as many stories. You know, we came out of the Gospels and there's all these parables and just a lot of stories with Christ in them, and it's a little bit easier to plan things for kids and to study that kind of stuff. And now we are talking about Paul and his missionary travels, but there's not very many stories. It's more principles that he's talking about as he's teaching people. And so that's kind of how Come Follow Me is this in September. It's very focused more on principles or ordinances, things that we do that way in the church, and not so much any stories that are going on. And I know that sometimes that makes it harder to teach kids. And sometimes it gets repetitive for us. I feel like I'm being repetitive when I make this because I'm like, we're talking about the same things over and over again. Because even in the very first week, we're going to be talking about the sacrament, and we're going to be talking about it for a few days. And so we're going to go through and talk about looking at examining ourselves, thinking about whether or not we are worthy to partake of the sacrament and what that means to remember our baptismal covenants. There'll be another day, I think it's like 3 days in a row, where it's going to give you an idea of what you could be doing during the sacrament, you know, having your kids be reverent, but giving them some things to do so they could, you know, pick some hymns or something they want to memorize, or they could write it down on an index card, maybe keep it in their scripture case and pull it out. They could have a few scriptures that they like to look at, maybe that talk about the sacrament or Christ's atonement or things like that, that help them stay focused on Christ during the sacrament. So that's what they're going to do here. You could brainstorm a whole bunch of things as a family, have them write down some ideas. You know, it could even involve just memorizing a scripture that they can sit and think about as they do this, have the sacrament. And, you know, as you're sitting there trying to be quiet for a while. So there's a few different ways you can go about it, but again, just giving them some resources they can pull from when they're sitting there bored and want to poke their siblings or start talking or things like that. They'll have something better to do. And that same week, we're also going to be talking about spiritual gifts. So on this page, I went through and put all the scriptures that were mentioned in Come Follow Me that are talking about spiritual gifts. So you can go through with your kids, or they can go through it by themselves and highlight all the spiritual gifts. There's going to be things that repeat themselves because we're reading, you know, from the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, and the Doctrine and Covenants. But there's also going to be a lot of new ones or different, like slightly different ones, which I think is important to realize. There are so many different types of spiritual gifts. And then the next day, they're going to think of what their spiritual gifts are. And I think that this is kind of a hard thing sometimes to do, to look at yourself and like, what am I good at? Especially, you know, spiritually, what's one of my strengths? And if you're struggling, sometimes it's good to ask somebody else, you know, to have your child ask their parents or an older sibling or somebody, you know, maybe a grandparent or aunt and uncle, somebody that could help them recognize those things in themselves, because again, it's sometimes really hard to recognize them. So that's what they're going to put here. And then down in this bottom box, they're going to write or draw a picture of how they can use that spiritual gift to bless other people's lives. Now that it's been pointed out that this is one of your strengths, how can you use it to go help others feel Christ's love through it? And then the next week, I think we're on the next week. I don't know, I can't keep track. But we're going to be in 1 Corinthians 15. And I don't know if there's still scripture masteries. One of them might be, but there was a chunk of scriptures in there, all scripture masteries right in a row, 3 of them. And that's basically what Come Follow Me is for this week, is those scriptures. So we're going to talk about baptisms for the dead, which is what this is. So they're going to read the scripture and figure out what ordinance is being performed in Paul's time that we still do today. So that's what that one is. And then there's also going to be another page with baptisms for the dead that help them prepare for the temple. So you might already have kids in your family that have gone into the temple and done baptisms. My oldest just started doing that this year. And so this would be a good time here when you're talking about preparing to enter the temple to have either maybe them share, since it's an older sibling, and you could share as a parent, or you could have somebody else, another family member, come share what they did to prepare to go to the temple, what they are still doing to be prepared to go to the temple. So then it can be written right here and you can have a whole discussion about it. And if you have like a sibling or yourself share, they can share what ordinance they did, what the favorite part was, how it made them feel, and then how they prepared for that. Just to help younger kids especially to know kind of what it's gonna look like. And then we'll get into the kingdoms of glory as well this week. That's one of the other chunks of scripture there. And this one references you to the Doctrine and Covenants if you want to go a little bit more in depth, since Joseph Smith talks about them a little bit more. But they're going to read through here and then draw the symbols, so you have the sun, moon, stars, and then what each kingdom is, like which one represents which kingdom. And then if you want to take it further and discuss these kingdoms more, you can go into the Doctrine and Covenants and learn a little bit more about them. And then we're going to skip a little bit, so we're not being super repetitive here, but we're going to talk about faith. Again, sacrament, faith, all these things, temples, they all come up quite a bit in slightly different ways, but basically the same. So we're learning about them in new ways. Hopefully this month, at least a little bit, take a different perspective on them. But we're gonna have a couple of scriptures that talk about faith. So you have one in 2 Corinthians, and then you also have one in Alma. So you can have your kids read these, you could read them to them, and they're going to write their own definition of faith. Okay, nothing crazy, like not making something up, but off of these verses, what do they understand about faith? What does that mean to them? Maybe it's easier for them to draw a picture, but just write their own definition of what faith looks like. So hopefully that will help them a little bit understand faith better. And then the next day, I believe they're gonna do Walk by Faith. This was activity in the Come Follow Me manual, and I tweaked it just a little bit, but you're gonna have siblings, or you could have parents, you could have everybody take turns. Do, like, one person's blindfolded, and then someone's gonna help them accomplish an activity. So I put a bunch here. You do not have to do these ones. Some of them might not even work out, or if you don't wanna make a big mess, you might wanna choose other ones too. So there's like build a tower with blocks. So this blindfolded person is gonna have someone help them build this tower with blocks, or just walk across the room. Get a cup and put water in it. Again, that one could end up making a mess. So it could be funny, but it just depends what you wanna do. Like make a sandwich, things like that, right? Some of these things might be easier than others. Some of them are messier than others. So you can kind of decide how you want to do it. And then they're gonna circle which one they decided to do, or that you said was okay as a parent, and then talk about it. You guys can talk about it a little bit, what it means to walk by faith, what that looks like, and why it's important. That we can't always see what's happening. We don't always understand it, but Christ is there, he's helping us, and he can't help us do everything, and he can't help us do everything perfectly, but he's still there beside us, helping us out. And then we're gonna skip again. I'm trying to keep things exciting and entertaining for y'all, but they're gonna talk about being a cheerful giver. And so the day before, they're gonna learn a little bit about this. They're gonna have to find it in the scriptures, and how sometimes when we go to do service or ask to help other people, we are just like, man, we don't wanna do it, we complain. We're just not very nice about it. And how it's important to be a cheerful giver. So I thought it would be fun. These are a few of the recommendations of songs that were in the manual, but to go over some of these very simple, very funny, like more like Sunbeam songs, and have the kids practice them. And if you have other songs that you want to practice with them as well about being a cheerful giver, so like this was the fun to do song, you know, singing a song is fun to do. And I put all the options they had on there, but you can obviously, like sharing my toys or cleaning my room or serving others is fun to do, you know, put in your own things or have your kids come up with another statement that goes along with being a cheerful giver. And then also when we're helping, we're happy, you know, and these might just help them. They're silly songs, very easy songs, but those sometimes are the best ones, because then when you are kind of being ornery about helping someone, it can pop into your head and make you smile because it is a little bit sillier. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is learning from trials. So we're gonna talk about this a little bit, I think the day before, but then this particular day, you're going to write some trials down. Maybe ones you've had in your family, maybe one that a certain individual in your family is struggling with that they feel comfortable talking about, or, you know, give you permission to discuss. It can be trials that you know of from other people. It could be in the scriptures and things that you've just seen, but then the blessings that come. Some of them, you might not know exact blessings yet. Okay, you might have to be like, okay, well, I'm hoping that this will be one of the blessings. I'm hoping one day I can feel peace over this, and that will be a blessing from this. Or maybe again, in the scriptures, you could find examples of the trials, and then you can see what the blessings are. So it might be easier, especially depending how old your kids are, to do this together. You could brainstorm a few trials, and again, they don't have to be something that anybody's going through that you know of, but then just brainstorm what could be some of the blessings that you don't see at the time of that trial, but what could be a blessing that comes from it. So just to get us thinking that there are blessings in the trials. Some of them we can see more in the moment, and other ones might take us a really long time to see. Okay, so that's Come Follow Me for September. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have fun, that it's not boring. Again, there's not stories. It's a lot easier to teach kids with stories. And so hopefully you can find ways to make it fun, a good learning experience, and a good way for your family to grow closer to Christ. So if you enjoy seeing these types of videos, please remember to give me a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.